Another reason why I left religion, church, fundamentalism, and Christianity is because the environment teaches its members, its leaders, and in the next generation to excommunicate, retaliate, or punish people who ultimately confess or provide evidence against abusers. Now, just like at every episode of what we talk about, this isn't about every church. This isn't about your church or any church besides the churches that I have visited, or in therapy, I've heard people who've confessed that this kind of behavior was directed at them or that they've directed against other people. So, a lot of the liberal churches no longer practice what we call shunning or ostracizing people. Now, churches still do this kind of behavior, especially the fundamentalist, Baptists, the more traditional churches. They still do, well, I can't remember the word for it, but it's basically putting out a member in their church who does bad things. I'm not saying that's a bad thing or a good thing. I'm saying that it happens. Now, in the secular world, we call it cancel culture. We cancel people who use platforms or authority to harm people. Personally, I think it's a good thing that bad people lose job opportunities or they just lose the options of having positions of authority so they can't misuse it, abuse, or harm people. The problem is when groups of people or individuals retaliate or make it difficult or forbid good people, usually victims or survivors of domestic, sexual, or any form of illegal or unethical abuse. In a workforce, if you're caught retaliating against somebody who honestly reports bad or illegal behavior, you can get sued. And I've actually watched something on YouTube about a woman who grew up and lived in John MacArthur's church. John MacArthur recently died, if I remember correctly, in either August or September of this year. He counseled a woman in his church who was a cis heterosexual woman, and she reported that her husband, I think she had at least 2 kids under the age of 18, and she reported to John MacArthur that he had been physically, emotionally, verbally abusive. And later on, he was convicted, her now ex-husband was convicted of harming children, as well as being physically and emotionally abusive, and it came out, if I remember correctly, that there had been slight sexual abuse as well. And luckily it was only against a woman who was his wife. It wasn't against his children, so that was at least a good part, that his children weren't affected that way. But he did harm other children in his church. And at first, she was met with more understanding, and John MacArthur in the church, well, at least the leaders in secret, did try to help her and her husband gain some necessary theological counseling. When it came to a point where she felt there was no reconciliation possible, she told John MacArthur and the leaders in private. The church didn't know about it at that time. She told the leaders in private that she was going to divorce him due to adultery, child sex abuse, and just the horrible treatment and abuse she had survived. And her kids had seen it, and I believe they her children gave evidence on the witness stand in court about it. And she was talked out temporarily of going to the police to report all kinds of terrible things, until she decided, with the help of a friend, she was going to report it. And that's when the church started to retaliate. And by retaliate, I mean during a service, and you can actually Google this on YouTube, he called her out in the middle of a sermon, in the middle of a church service, that said she was a bad woman because she dared to go to the police after she was told not to, which I believe is illegal. You can't tell somebody, if you're in a position of authority, to not go to the police, and not to report ongoing abuse is a criminal. And he rebuked her verbally in a group of at least 200 plus people. And everyone in the church, at least from her lawyer's admission, turned against her and her kids. Basically was trying to force her to go back to her abusive, child abusing husband, and she decided to sue. She chose to sue the church, and this is a very traditional church, and it did not go over well. They basically retaliated against her, spread lies about her, that she had been unfaithful and a terrible mother. Well, it turned out what the husband did was 100% true. They proved it in court with witnesses. Her husband basically beat her kids, committed marital rape, and raped several children under the age of 18, which are multiple felonies, and he was convicted of it. So they proved it in court. There was no apology by John MacArthur. I don't remember if the church apologized. I doubt it. And anyone who had ruined her reputation or retaliated never apologized. She never admitted if any individuals or friends had apologized. I'm sure there were a few that probably apologized. But the people, the white cis men in charge, did not apologize, either in a letter or publicly, which they should have done both. They didn't. And now she's suing the church for covering up abuse, telling her not to report, and failure to report, which in that state is a law. You can lose your tax exemption status if you do not report abuse. And the dynamic of the church was incredibly abusive, which is ironic since my fundamentalist family would listen to John MacArthur every Sunday morning, remotely through the internet, especially during COVID. This is the kind of dynamics that a lot of churches use to silence victims. Basically how Trump treats Epstein survivors. Now, if you've been to a church that did not retaliate and actually reported to the police, that is great. But there are a lot of churches out there, specifically certain denominations, that do not follow the law consistently about reporting, mandatory reporting of abuse for adults or children. And there was a court case that went to a Supreme Court. I'm not sure if it was the federal Supreme Court or the state Supreme Court. But this one church was, this pastor was trying to win a case that said that if he heard mandatory abuse while talking to a member of his parish, he didn't have to report it. And several courts said that a pastor is not a priest. And in my opinion, even priests should report any form of abuse. Even if it's not illegal, it should always be reported to the church. Anyone who does something that is against the religion, against just common decency, even if it's not illegal.